So I wanted to welcome all of you, first of all, to this event that we're having this morning. I'm riding a little bit of an emotional high. November 1, which is our first major college application deadline, is just around the corner. So I feel like Magda in the movie There's Something About Mary, if you remember that movie, where she's lifting up the couch and she's vacuuming furiously. It is go time in our office, and we're moving at breakneck speed, but we have everything under control. My main goal for all of you here today is to get to know our team better and to hear from some experts in the field about how college applications and how the higher ed landscape has changed in the past couple of years. And I really want you in 45 minutes or an hour from now, as you exit this building or you move on to listening to the Grifftones, to think, hey, that was worthwhile. That was worthwhile. So here we go. Here's our agenda for the day. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, and we'll have some questions at the end for all of you. And I just want to open up by having our guests say a little bit about themselves. One of the benefits of being at Pomfret School is our exposure or the way that our kids interact with college admissions reps. We are so fortunate to have Vern and Andy with us today. Vern is the Director of Admissions at the University of Connecticut and was recently named Chair of the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, NACAC, right? This is a big deal. So Vern, can you just talk a little bit about your background and maybe one or two cool facts about you?
Yeah. Thank you for that introduction, and now I feel like I'm on the spot, so I have to try to live up to that. So it is a pleasure being here. Again, my name is Vern Granger. I'm at the University of Connecticut down the road. I'm based on the Storrs campus. I've been at the university for about 3 years now. I came from the Ohio State University, and by law, you have to say "the" when you say Ohio State University. Somebody clapping OH, okay, all right. And so my experience has been at public universities, and so I've worked exclusively at public universities, and so that's where my professional experience is from. It's exciting being here because, Andy and I were just talking about how, you take for granted these type of engagements and opportunities. I mean, they were so routine before, but the past year and a half, they've all been virtual. So to be able to be amongst you and be able to engage and talk with you and hopefully answer your questions is something that's very, very exciting to me. So it's a pleasure being invited to come and again speak to you and share some information about the college admissions process. I mean, no matter what stage your children are at, whether they're freshmen, sophomores, juniors, whatever it may be. I mean, it's an exciting stage and an exciting point for everyone because they're about to reach that significant milestone on their path to adulthood, and we all know the impact of college on our individual lives, and so it's a very important piece, and I'll just say, and they did not pay me to say this, I'm saying it unsolicited, you all have amazing resources here in your college counseling office, and you're very fortunate to have those, and we've been doing this this profession a while, and frankly speaking, most secondary schools are not as fortunate, and so I just wanted to say that again, that what Bruce started off with is taking the opportunity to get to know the counseling staff because we interact with them a lot in our jobs, and they really are well respected in the profession. So I'll stop right there and look forward to the conversation we're about to have.
Vern, you can keep complimenting us as long as you'd like. All right. Our next guest is Andy Palumbo. Andy is the Vice President of Enrollment Management at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Little round of applause for Andy. He was just promoted.
Thanks, Bruce.
You're welcome. Oh, hold on. I was just about to say a nice thing about you.
Please.
Andy came to me because of a letter that he wrote 2 years ago to juniors that was published in the Washington Post. And I read it, and I thought that is one of the most caring letters I have ever read from a person in his position in higher ed. And since then, I've gotten to know Andy better, go back to him a little bit, and Andy he is really a testing expert, and he's gonna be the person that we turn to in a few minutes to talk more about standardized testing. So Andy, if you could just say, you're welcome to walk around too, you're mic'd up.
All right, sounds good. So, Vern, Bruce didn't pay you? No, I'm kidding. It's great to be here, everybody. My name is Andy Palumbo, Vice President for Enrollment Management at WPI. Thrilled to be here, thrilled to be able to engage in programs like this that used to seem so normal and now are just different. But it's really a great opportunity to engage with you all, for us to learn what's on your minds. I mean, things have changed even for us and how we try to support you, your students, but also for you to hear from us and for you to ask us the questions that you need to feel better about this process. And so, yeah, what do I want to say here? It was an interesting fact, right? Let's see. So you never know what's going to happen when you work in college admissions. And so there was one night I was going to Long Island. I was late. There was traffic. There's always traffic in Long Island. And I didn't get to eat dinner. I went to a college fair. I got back to my hotel at 10 o'clock at night, and I went to the hotel bar. And it was dead. There was one person who walked up behind me as I was eating my quesadilla at the bar, sad quesadilla alone. And I hear, "Nice suit, yeah boy, Flava Flav." And I hung out with Flava Flav for 2 hours. What? We talked about the Iraq War, President Bush. I won't get into the details, but you never know what's gonna happen when you hit the road to visit high school. So that's my interesting fact.
That's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good one.
And on that note,
you can see why I invited both of them here today. Okay, I'm the dorky dude on the left, and this is my 16th year at Pomfret School. It's my 14th as the Director of College Counseling. I am married to a Pomfret alum who happens to be in the Hall of Fame. And I have 3 sons, one who is a pilot and graduating from the Florida Institute of Technology this upcoming May. I have a son, Ian, who's a member of the senior class, so I'm going through the college application process as a counselor and as a dad right now. And my youngest boy, Cal, is a freshman here, and just an absolute delight to have my 2 youngest boys with me here this year. One little fun fact about me you might not know, in addition to just this tremendous glare that's coming off my forehead, is that I have my motorcycle license, and I used to have a bike. I'm going to have Art and Sarah say a couple quick words about themselves. So in the middle is Art Horst.
Hello.
It'll come.
Hello. Hi, my name's Art Horst. I am in my 25th year at Pomfret, my 6th year in college counseling, and I have had 3 children graduate from Pomfret and 2 who are currently seniors. One has Sarah as a college counselor, one has Bruce as a college counselor, and I thank them very much for putting up with my children. I've been here a long time, made Pomfret my home, and look forward to working with your children.
didn't realize we were doing introductions today, but my name's Sarah Goronski. This is my 4th year at Pomfret. Prior to coming to Pomfret, I worked 6 years in college admissions and in mental health counseling before that. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I live off campus with my husband and my daughter. My fun fact, I don't have a motorcycle license, I don't have twins, I have 10 chickens and a dog. Thanks.
Thank you. Another little fun fact, I also have chickens, so Art is the only member of the team that does not have chickens. Lauren Griffin, our testing coordinator, is in the back. Here's Lauren's picture right here. Let's give Lauren a round of applause. Lauren is a person, you should be nice to all of us, but Lauren in particular handles testing accommodations, PSAT, SAT, and ACT proctoring. Sarah handles AP testing. And should your child need accommodations, or if you need to talk to Lauren about accommodations, she's in the back. She's the person that you really need to talk to. One question we get a lot, just quickly about standardized testing, sometimes parents think that because their child has accommodations for the ACT or the SAT, that it applies to the other test, but they are separate testing organizations and you have to apply for accommodations to both. Lauren, is there anything else that I should have added? Okay, great, I got a thumbs up. Okay, so this is a quote that I found in April of this past year. And I wanted to use this as a prompt to see what Vern and Andy had to say about how COVID has impacted higher education. So Vern, if you could start, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I was just thinking, I forgot to share my fun fact, so my apologies for that. I know I can't top the Flavor Flav, but when my family and I, when we moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, to begin my job at the University of Tennessee, we were featured on the TV show House Hunters. So that's my, it's not Flavor Flav, but you know, it.
We have to talk afterwards.
Yeah.
I thought that was all fake.
Yes.
That's fascinating.
Yes. So, you know, just in you know, speaking to the quote, I mean, I'm never somebody who believes in absolutes, so I don't think something is absolutely one way or another. I'll just say the pandemic has impacted college admissions and universities, just, you know, like it's impacted, you know, every part of society. You know, at UConn and at other public flagship institutions, we did not see any negative impacts on our enrollment. In fact, many of us saw increases in our in the opportunities at the university. So, you know, so in that regard, there was a positive. I think there was an impact on the engagement. I mean, there's been things that we've learned. Many of us were not really taking advantage of virtual and the digital marketing, and you know, we were just talking earlier that, you know, many of us have now increased our on-demand content, our videos, the opportunities to provide you and your students the opportunity to learn more about our institutions. And so, again, that's definitely a positive. I think some of the negatives are that for some of our students who may not have access to the resources, there's no doubt that they have been negatively impacted by the opportunity to connect with our institutions. So I think that is something that's real. There is absolutely no doubt that students' learning experiences over the past years have been impacted, and we are starting to see those impacts on our campuses, where, you know, we see more and more students who are seeking out assistance for mental health, or some students were not able to take some of the normal courses that they would have taken in the past, or gotten the support that they would have gotten. So we're seeing those in the application process, and we're seeing them on our institutions. So, you know, it's definitely impacted us. There have been some ways that we've learned from it, and we've been able to take advantage of some of the the opportunities that made us really rethink how we do certain things, which have been positives, but there have absolutely been some negative impacts that we're facing now and will probably be facing over the next few years.
Yeah, Vern really covered a lot there. I guess I'll say just one or two things that changed that I think were positive for all of us. I think that in the years leading up to the pandemic, college admissions and the college search process just had become more and more of a rat race. And I'm not suggesting that stopped, but a lot of the questions pivoted from how do I get into the best college to how safe is this college? Yeah. How is this college supporting students during a public health crisis, through a mental health crisis? And I just feel like the level of dialogue and the level of depth that families have had to ask questions have made the college search process better, students finding better places, parents feeling more confident when dropping their students off for fall despite a global pandemic. And so I think that's a real positive and something I hope stays. Vern and I were just talking about a lot of the things we hope stay, that have sort of forced us out of the rinse and repeat cycle that college admissions can often be. And then the other thing is, engagement's different, but we've been able to scale in many ways. And so normally I do 5 or 6 of these type of sessions a year, and they're some of my favorite things to do. Last year I probably did almost 30 because I could just hit the Zoom button, and I did something with Pomfret, and then an hour later I'd be on the West Coast, and so not just the fossil fuels we're saving, but the opportunity to engage with students, in our roles, you don't have that as much as when you start out, and so it's one of the things that's really special. And so for me, it's been an opportunity to engage more and more in forums like this.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you both very much. When I put this slide together, I just had a little twitch, right? Remembering what my own standardized testing experiences were. I won't tell you what my scores were, but it was a good thing I was 6'3", becoming a student athlete. So this is really Andy's milieu, and we'll let Andy kind of take it over.
Sure. So the standardized testing arena has certainly changed and is continuing to change as we speak. So before the pandemic, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that you would take a standardized test or 3 or 10. Don't do that. So as the pandemic hit, one of the first things to visibly be impacted, as many of you know, was the ability to even offer these tests safely. And so students were scrambling, some hopping flights to different states if they had the ability to, but at the same time, about 750 colleges very quickly either went test optional, saying that test scores are not required, or test blind, which meant that they won't consider them even if you send them. And so before the pandemic, we had about 1,050 colleges that were test optional. So really about half of all colleges in the country were test optional. I believe all of the public Northeast flagships were optional. So this was certainly something that was a movement already happening, but COVID really accelerated it. And so you had a lot of schools that maybe were thinking about moving in that direction, or maybe weren't and did very quickly. And so I think from a parent's perspective, there's a lot of concern, there's a lot of skepticism, these colleges have always required them, like, should we really get them? Is this like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge? And I think from the college side, I'd like to say that, I've worked with a lot of those schools that went sort of emergency test optional, sitting down with directors or back of house staff, talking through how we've done it, WPI or at other places that I've been at. I think these schools genuinely take that change very seriously. We all rely on our credibility, and that's something that if a college makes a statement, if they're not standing behind it, you're going to find out, and it's going to come out. And so while there have been a couple news stories about schools where they clearly continue to anchor on those tests, and if you didn't have them, you didn't have a chance. What's been more surprising is how overwhelmingly that wasn't the case. And so I think that is a good thing for you all to know, that if a school says they're optional, you should believe them, and not feel the pressure to get these tests. Now, however, most students should probably still take a test, but hopefully the pressure is off. And that's the one thing that I think is most important to talk about when we talk about standardized testing, is that there is the most selective schools in the country. If you get a perfect score, that's not getting you a seat in the class. You get a perfect score, that's not getting you a seat at UConn or at WPI. Could it be one part of your entire application that helps you if the school considers test scores? Absolutely. But in the vast majority of cases, and I work at a STEM school with, the average GPA for students is 3.9 in our entering class. And, the SAT, ACT scores, I actually don't know them, but they were very high. It's just a check. All that work, all of that time straining to get 10 points, 20 points, 30 points higher, it's a check. It's a, yep, this confirms what we see in the rest of the process. And so I don't say this to say you should just totally blow them off. I think just find balance. The hours spent prepping for these tests or worrying about these tests, the anxiety, the stress they add, for a check that someone with 80 points lower on the SAT got and someone 20 points higher got. And Vern can share his experience as well. But this is something that I just see, as a father, sorry, I'm the mic hitter. As a father of 3 young girls, I think about what can I do in my college admissions role to make sure that they don't spend countless hours and nights and weekends stressing about these tests. Yeah, take the test. See how you do. And if you feel like, oh, you know what, I was a little nervous, now I understand it, I want to take it one more time, fine. You don't need to take it 3 times. You don't need to take it 5 times. You don't need to hire a private tutor. It is not a major part of this process. And so I just want to say that, and then share that there are still 3 different ways that schools will use tests. There's tests required, where schools have really doubled down and said, no, we need the test, so find a way to get the test. That's fairly unusual right now. About only 25% or less are absolutely requiring these standardized tests. Test optional is by far overwhelmingly the most popular. About 3/4 of schools are test optional, about 1,700, 1,800. And most of those schools, even those that changed over the past year or 2, most of those schools are going to stay that way. This is a permanent change in college admissions. And then one of the most dramatic changes has been institutions like mine. Prior to the pandemic, there was one college that was test blind, that would say, we don't care about your test scores. We have concerns about the problematic correlations with family income, with race, with gender, first language spoken in the household, all of which are true. There are problematic correlations there with the SAT and the ACT. And we just don't want to see it. We don't want to introduce that into our process. And so now there are about 82 of us that are fully test blind. So if you send the scores, no matter how good they are, our admissions officers will never see them. They're screened out through the computer. How can we possibly make good decisions without them? Well, Vern does it every day. We've done it every day since 2007. And so I think there's a concern that many times parents might feel like, oh, someone's going to have it, or we're missing something, or what's going to be emphasized more. We already have enough information to make really strong decisions for our colleges. And like I said, very often, it was just sort of a confirming check. And so keep that in mind. I'm not saying, even as a test blind institution who I advocate against these tests very strongly. I'm not saying don't take the test. I'm saying don't stress about the test. If there's one thing you take away from me besides my Flava Flav anecdote, it's this: like, really don't stress about the test. Don't put that stress on your student. Students, take a deep breath. This is not the most important thing. If you could spend the 5 hours a week you might have spent prepping on the test or thinking you were going to, getting outside and playing a sport, playing a musical instrument, helping out around the house, right, Mom and Dad? You know, any of that time is better spent than prepping for these tests. So I'll stop there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me? I'm going to go up here. Andy, why are schools going test blind?
Yeah, so I can't speak for all tests, but for WPI, it was about data, because we're a STEM institution, and it was about values. You know, we looked at actually the College Board and the ACT for our data. And so the College Board data, they did a validity study to see how strongly these tests correlate with first-year college GPA. And so the correlation, when you use a high school transcript and a test score, they're predictive of a college GPA with a correlation of 0.61, which is pretty good. It's pretty predictive. Now, if you take away those standardized test scores, 0.53 of that 0.61 is found in the high school transcript alone. And I can't speak for UConn, but that is not how we're using those tests. We are not in a laboratory crunching these numbers and, you know, plugging them into an algorithm. That's not why we got into admissions. You know, we're trying to find out who students are and get a sense of not just who they are, but the context, the opportunities they've had, and how they've chosen to take advantage of those opportunities. And so these test scores don't tell us a whole lot. They have those problematic correlations. And so for me, the conversation I always have, whether it's with peers, with students, with school counselors, is, you know, if we were to hear that we're starting the college admissions process from scratch, and, you know, we need to figure out how to fairly determine who's going to get into our college. I've got this test, right? Everyone's going to take it, almost everyone, and it's going to give us a number, and we can compare that number to one another. But, you know, if the student's wealthy, their number's going to be higher. If students of a certain race, it might be higher, it might be lower, and women who by far have higher GPAs in every high school in the country than men, they're going to score a little bit lower on every single section of the test, every single year, in every single state. Well, it's the same number, right? We can just put them side to side. I think anyone would look at that and say, no, like, why would we do that? It's like, well, it gives us 0.08 additional correlation score. No. And so what we're dealing with here is a lot of misconceptions and a legacy of these tests meaning more than they used to. And so it's a difficult thing to overcome, and that's why I think we have to do our job educating you all, hitting mics to make sure you're still awake, and just really, never trust someone who says, believe me, so I won't say it. But listen, I really, these tests, the anxiety around them, I think, is the most destructive process, part of this process, and it's unnecessary.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll move on. So we're going to turn the mic back to Vern. Vern's going to talk a little bit about research in colleges. You can see me after if you can identify the college picture here.
So yeah, I want to talk about the process of doing your homework and looking at colleges. But again, I want to back up everything Andy talked about with the test scores, and again, emphasize the point that, you know, test optional truly means test optional for the institutions. And so I think that's a very, very important point that hopefully everyone takes from this program. But you know, the researching, the process of researching colleges, you know, it's changed a bit over the past year and a half. Whereas, you know, our campuses over that time, we would have been filled with students and families coming on to our campuses and doing visits and meeting with our students and meeting with faculty and staff, and that went away. I mean, we're slowly coming back, and, you know, we both have these on-campus visit experiences that are now available, but for a while it was gone, and it's not fully back to what it was, let's say, fall of 2019. But that does not mean that there are not the opportunities to research different colleges or universities. out there. I mean, there are great, again, I talked about the resources that you have here. I mean, that would be the first thing that I would say in thinking about identifying colleges that may be good fits. But there are tons of resources online that are available to do the research. If you just look at the institutional level, all of us, again, we move to a virtual space. We all have the virtual tours. We all have the on-demand content. We all have the information sessions for you to get that information about any of our institutions. And so that would be one way that I would say that you can get your information. But I think before that, I mean, taking advantage of the different resources that are out there. I mean, we just got done talking about tests, standardized tests, and the SAT and the ACT. But I will say, share one resource that is provided by the College Board that I frankly refer a lot for students to research colleges, and that's their Big Futures. And so if you haven't had an opportunity to go to that site, I strongly recommend it because you can do searches about universities using many different filters, whether it be the academic program, whether it be location, size, diversity, cost, financial aid, all of those things, which are very, very important. I mean, the advice I like to give parents when I'm talking to them about this search is that reminding you that you do have a voice in this process, and I would encourage you to have that conversation with your child about the process. And so I don't ever want a parent to feel that you should stay away, you should not participate in the process, because you absolutely do have a voice. You have your experience, your life experience as someone who has gone to post-secondary institution, a host of other reasons, but you should feel comfortable in participating. But the point I also want to make is that you should let your child drive the process in a lot of ways. And the analogy I always give is that when it's 20 degrees on our campuses and it's 8 in the morning and your son or daughter is going to that calculus course, it's not going to be you who's going to be going to that. It's going to be your child who's going to be going through that. And and for that student to feel, engaged and fired up about, well, not fired up, I don't know anybody's going to be fired up about that, but to be interested, Andy might, but they have to feel comfortable at that institution. And so that's why I believe it's important that your child, in a lot of ways, drives the process. I always encourage families not to be blinded by the Ivies or blinded by those quote unquote top universities that in some ways skew a lot of the perceptions about the admissions process. So for instance, there's a perception if you just focus on those institutions that only 5% of students are going to be getting admitted into universities, when the reality is that the overwhelming majority of students will be admitted to one of their top 3 choices of institutions. And so that's one thing to, again, keep in mind about this process. The fact is that if your child does their research, if they're open about the process, and open being that they're not just focusing on a school because of a name or because they see them on TV or because of their ranking, but they really are open about trying to find that best fit, I can almost guarantee that they are going to find a university that they're going to be able to enroll at, to be successful, to get the enriching experience, and to help prepare them for life after graduation. But it does require a degree of open-mindedness. And so that's where, again, I go back to my original point. It needs to be a joint process. You as a parent providing that guidance and and be a part of the conversations, but allowing your child to be open in trying to explore the institutions that are ultimately going to be the best fit for them. So a little bit of advice that I always like to talk about when thinking about this search process and exploring different colleges out there.
Great. Thanks, Vern. Andy, can you talk a little bit about visiting colleges, please?
Yeah, so like Vern said, visiting colleges has changed. So visiting could mean going to the website or downloading an app. It certainly can still mean that college visit, but it's going to be a little bit different. I used to say, when you go to a college visit, have some type of organization so you can keep track, because you'll go blind trying to keep everything down if it's all just scribbled around, or if you're trying to keep it in your head. It's not possible. So come up with some sort of organization that'll make sense for you. Hopefully your child is driving the process, as Vern has said. But now it means make sure you have your vaccine card. Make sure if you need to sign some type of attestation form that you've done X, Y, or Z, or that, so it's gotten more complicated. So again, I think while this can be frustrating, it also hopefully will help you narrow a little bit. Think about maybe spending a little bit more time on the campuses you're visiting, or spending a little bit more time in the surrounding area, getting a sense. You also get to see how they're keeping their students safe, because it's a balance, right? We want to bring visitors onto campus because mathematically, if we don't, we're not going to bring in the class we need. But we want to show off our great campus and facilities. We want to show off our students and our faculty, but we also want to keep our students and faculty safe. And so there's that balance, is sort of the world we're in right now. And so visiting colleges, I think it's good to visit early, to take the pressure off, to space things out. Maybe you do a college road trip one vacation week or over the summer, and that's great. One thing you should do is have a balanced list, whether it's researching colleges or visiting. Something I've seen as I've worked at a selective liberal arts college, selective STEM college, and then less selective private and public universities. I'm seeing more and more balance in students' college lists now. I think in the Northeast specifically, there's kind of and I'm going to say this. I'm from Massachusetts, so I've seen this firsthand. There's some ignorance and arrogance regionally about the types of colleges that are on people's lists, and I think somewhere along the way, we as parents have conflated within our society. Wanting the best for our kids. Of course we want the best for our kids, but we've mixed that up along the way and think the best place, the best name, the best rank, whatever it is, and that's not what's best for them. And so I think wanting what's best for your children is completely natural and is absolutely the right path to take in this process, but make sure it's what's best for them, and it's what they want. That should be the driver. And if you do that, they're gonna get admitted to their top schools, because they'll have crafted the right list.
Absolutely.
And so, I've heard a lot of things in college admissions, but I've heard people say, "Oh, we're not putting a community college on our list. We're not putting a public university on our list." Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. There's so many schools. There's thousands of schools. There are hundreds, if not thousands, that are right for your son or daughter. Are you going to visit all those? No. But try to visit a balance. And it's okay if there's a school in your backyard that you think is just, hey, we want to go to Wesleyan. I don't think my child's ever going to go to Wesleyan. But, Wesleyan feels a whole lot like a bunch of other Northeast liberal arts schools in small towns. And so it's not going to be a wasted visit. And sometimes doing that school that's in your backyard or that's close by, a community college, can give you a sense of the college visit and give you confidence to ask the questions you need to ask. So, don't be so overwhelmed that, from the second you start researching colleges, do you have to visit the right mix of colleges? Just get on a college campus, get a feel for it, because you'll start to see, oh, I don't like that size. Oh, campus aesthetics aren't that important to me. I really care about research facilities, or, whatever it is. And those are the things that when you make your college visits, whether virtual or on campus, you should have questions that you're trying to ask so you can compare at the end how people have answered it, what resources they have. But those things you value, those should be the drivers of what you're trying to see on a visit or what you're trying to see in a virtual session or the questions you're trying to ask.
One of the pieces of advice that I'll give you from the many college visits I've made is to get off-road a little bit. You might not necessarily be able to do that right now during COVID, but spending some time in the dining hall, talking to kids that you see on the walkways, maybe going into the sports facility or the fitness center, just getting off the planned route of the campus tour, I think can be really helpful and one of the most telling ways to find a school's soul. Okay, Vern, you're up. So I have just put all my effort into applying to the University of Connecticut. I've hit the submit button. I feel like $1 million. And what happens next?
So what happens next? So right now, thousands of universities throughout the country, like the University of Connecticut, are receiving applications from students from all over the country, all over the world to come to our institutions. And for many universities, they employ what is more of an open admissions process, that the overwhelming majority of the overwhelming majority of the students are going to be admitted to those institutions. But there are a handful of institutions, and the two up here are represented in that will employ what is called a holistic review of the application. And it's a term that you probably have heard, and there's a lot of mystery probably around what that is, but basically what it means is that there's not going to be one single factor or one number that will constitute an admit or not to our institutions. And it goes to the philosophy that our institutions have, is that we're not admitting a class, we are building a class. And there's a big distinction in that. And what if we were just admitting a class, it would mean that we would put all the students on a spreadsheet, draw a line, and take the students above that and deny the students below that. And it's not that, that's not what a holistic evaluation is. And it goes back to what Andy talked about with relation to testing. There are so many factors that go into a test score that he talked about: background, experience, income. All of these things go into it, and it goes into all of the pieces of the application. And so, when we're looking at these applications, and one of the most popular questions I get, or my staff will get, is, I have a 3.8 GPA. Can you tell me if I'm going to be admitted or not? And our answer is, I can't tell you that, because again, we're going to be looking at the complete application. And so if you just take the academic record, we're not only looking at your academic achievement, but we're looking at the students' courses and their rigor and how well they've challenged themselves. If they submit a test score, that will be looked at. But if not, again, test optional means test optional. All of our campuses, when we're talking about building a class, what we're also talking about is building a community of students who are going to support the academic missions of our institutions. So I say that to emphasize the importance of character. I mean, we want students who are going to be able to come and be able to contribute positively to our campus communities. We want students to submit those letters of recommendation. Although I will just say that does not mean submitting 10 letters of recommendation, but a couple of recommendations from folks who can speak intimately about your academic potential, your character, why you would be a good fit at an institution. Those types of things are very, very important. The personal statement is something that we get a lot of value in. It allows us to get a window into your student, what things they're involved in, what things they're engaged in, speaking with their own voice. One of the things that I never say when I'm talking about things that they should be thinking about is the term passion, because I think that is very dangerous, in my opinion, to have that expectation of a 16, 17, 18-year-old, that they have passion about something. I know many 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds who I think are well-adjusted and they don't have passion about something. But what we do want to see is that the student is engaged, showing interest in things outside the classroom. So it's not that they're in necessarily 10 different clubs or organizations. But they are showing an interest and engagement in whatever it may be. Those are things that are very, very important to us in the review process. So all of these pieces of information allow us to go ahead and make that evaluation when we're reviewing the application. And then as a part of that building of the class, there are things that we're taking into consideration at our institutions. And the holistic review process at UConn is going to be different than at Annie's institution, which is going to be different than Brown, and so on, because we each have different missions at our institutions. And so, there are going to be things that we are going to be looking for and we're going to want to build in our class. Academic diversity is something that's very, very important. Geographic diversity is important. We want, as a flagship, it's important to us that we have representation from throughout the state of Connecticut. So that's very, very important to us. And so there are all these different priorities that each of our institutions will have that we're prioritizing in our application review process. The final thing that I want to share with you, and I think this is a very important term that I think all of you, hopefully you understand how we've evaluated, and that is context. And context to us is extremely important. It always was an important aspect that we trained our readers to make sure that they understand the context of that student, their academic experience, their background experiences. So that's always been something that we spend a lot of time training our readers on. But it's taken on even more significance in light of the pandemic. Because as I said earlier, we know that your academic experiences of your children are totally different than those in the past. And I'll give a personal example. We have a 16-year-old daughter who is a junior who goes to Glastonbury High School just outside of Hartford, and the school is a very, very good, strong public school, but even that school was impacted on how classes were delivered. And so we know that the experiences of students have been different. They, in many cases, have not been able to take advantage of some of the enrichment opportunities. My own daughter, there was an enrichment opportunity. There was a camp that she had been accepted to, and she was going to be traveling for a week to go to that camp. It, obviously with the pandemic, it was not that way. And so that is something that's different. And I imagine many of your children in the audience had similar opportunities that were not able to be accomplished. And so I don't want students to feel, and I don't want you as parents to feel, that because my child did not have the opportunity to participate in those experiences, internships, enrichment opportunities, whatever, that they're going to be penalized in the review process. Because that context that I talked about, that we always prioritize and felt is important, we understand that in the application review that we're going to be doing of the fall 2022 students, the fall 2023 students, and again, over those next couple of years, because we understand that your children's experiences are just frankly different than the experiences of students who've applied to our institutions in the past. So.
All right, great. We have about 10 minutes left of our presentation, and then we're going to go to questions. If time permits, Andy, I would like you at the end just to talk about application review at WPI. I'm just curious if there's an academic rating or a rating that comes out of that. Okay, advice for parents. This is a much better picture of me than the one earlier. This is my wife and my youngest boy, or my eldest son, in Florida this past June. My wife and I went to visit him, and as we were walking around campus, I asked him all kinds of questions about his experience at the school. How's this? How's that? What's the community like here? And at the end of all of these questions, I put my dad hat back on and just said, are you enjoying it? And he said, Dad, there is no place I'd rather be. And it was just like one of those, like you could hear the bells up above. And it was just a terrific experience for me as a parent to feel that. And he's different from my other two kids, for sure. But I'm curious about what Vern and Andy, and we'll start with Andy here, just about some specific advice for parents.
Yeah, as a parent, there's so much I could say. I think the most important thing is to realize that this process, which takes up so much mind space, which can take up so much time if you don't manage it and control it, don't let it control you, also coincides with, for many of you, the last couple years that you'll have the same type of relationship with your child. And so remember that and find balance there, because just speaking from experience, I know that when I wasn't driving the college conversation, the second my mother or my father brought up colleges, I would roll my eyes and went upstairs, so find those ways that you can agree ahead of time if there's maybe a designated time or designated way in which you're gonna guide the process and make it a negotiation, right? You as parents probably have some insights as to what it's gonna take, and maybe some of the strengths and maybe some of the weaknesses, procrastinator. And so, try to have that open conversation early in the process to just say, here are some of the guardrails I think we need to set up for this process, but you're driving, right? And if we start straying toward those guardrails, I might push you back into the lane. But really this is you driving, and so this is a big responsibility, but a big opportunity as well. And so there's a great book that I just read recently that helped me realize all the parenting mistakes that I'm currently making. It's called How to Raise an Adult. It's been out for a few years, but it's a great book, and there's a lot of advice in there that basically is in line with that sort of thinking. And so, I think it's more about being a guide to the process and making sure things don't go off the rails, but in most cases they won't. And so treasure the time, try to make it a partnership, one in which you can support your children in the areas they may need that support most, but step back in those places where you might feel like, I have an idea about this, but if they seem confident, let them follow that confidence.
Yeah, I echo everything that Andy said. I mean, the only the advice I would add to that is that instead of focusing on the things that you don't have control over, I would encourage you to focus on the many more things you have control over in this whole process. And what I mean by that is, again, something I said earlier, don't focus on the fact that, there may be this very, very finite small number of institutions that have the 5 to 10% admit rates. Instead of focusing on that, focusing on the fact that you all have a lot more control in the process. You will be the ones who will ultimately identify the list of schools that your child is going to be visiting, considering, and where they're going to be visiting, and the type of program that is a good fit at that institution, and the location, and all of these things. And it goes back to something Andy and I have been saying, and again, I'll just conclude in this, that if you go in open-minded, do your research, I can guarantee that they will find an institution that will be a place that they will be able to be successful. There aren't many guarantees in life, but this is something I just feel so confident in, that, again, if they go in with that open-minded attitude and they're truly doing the research, that they will find an institution that's going to be a good fit for them where they can end up being successful. So,
great. Thank you. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what you can expect from us. This slide is from our college counseling booklet. We have them around in our offices. Admissions has them as well, and I'll just give you a second to take a look at that. In non-COVID times, we would typically introduce ourselves to the freshman class. In sophomore year, one of our big events is to take students to take the class on a college visit so they can see how the three of us roll and learn a little bit more about what to do and questions to ask and what it feels like to be on a college campus. We are speaking to our juniors on November the 16th as part of a forum meeting. We're going to give them a homework assignment. They will fill out a questionnaire, and then they will be assigned their college counselor in early December. And then typically, because we're still working with the seniors through the month of December and into January, we'll start to meet one-on-one with juniors in January or perhaps a little bit later than January in junior year. But we are accessible all the time, all three of us. My office, by the way, now is in the OSU. So I'm right outside the ping pong table. In addition to hearing the pool balls smack each other and the ping pong table and the trash talking that goes with that, there are hundreds of kids passing by our offices every day. And I'm fully confident that if your child comes to see us, that they will get their questions answered. And then senior year, we're meeting with kids regularly. I like to joke that our offices right now are like the deli counter in the supermarket, where you are just taking a number and we're spending a lot of time. And that's the hallmark of what we do, is the amount of time we spend with kids and spend with families. That's where we are right now with our seniors. And it was interesting to listen to Vern and Andy give their advice. My personal advice, really, and I just want to expand on what they said, but is just to limit the time you talk to your child about college. I had a student come into my office earlier this week, almost in tears, saying, every time I talk to my mom, she is on my back about my college search. And she's just frazzled. And we're able to talk her through it and just settle that down. And that would be certainly a takeaway from me. Okay. And then perfectly timed, right at 11:15, where we wanted to be, we're happy to take a few questions from you if you would like. So if you're brave and kind, you can step up to the microphone and see what you have on your mind. It looks like we have a volunteer.
You talked about how the college visitation process has changed. It's a lot more virtual. A big aspect of college is not just the academics and the buildings, but the life that's associated at that college. In a virtual tour environment, how does a student and a family get a feeling of what their student will experience outside of the academics, the life of the college?
Good question.
Isn't that a brilliant question? Right? I'm gonna give you that. Yeah, it was not planted.
So I'll hop on first, and Vern, if you want to follow up. So yeah, it's a great question, and that's actually the one that we all grappled with in March 2020 as we approached the decision month, April, where most students are making their final decision. Typically, our campuses are abuzz with visitors, thousands upon thousands of visitors, and we lost that. And so we had to think about, how do we take these full day campus visit, like exciting accepted student days with thousands of students on campus, engaging with our students and faculty, how do we translate that to online in a way that's meaningful? And so we thought about, what are the major components? It's students engaging with other students. It's students engaging with the faculty that they're going to meet. And it's students being able to find out more about those things that they'll be participating in outside of the classroom. And so every college is doing it a little bit differently, but ultimately, those are the elements that matter so much, right? Is if you've created a good list, as Vernon described, You're gonna have a ton of great options, and they're all gonna have your major. They're all gonna be places you'd be willing to go. So which one feels right? And that's what it boils down to. And so virtually, a lot of WPI can speak to what we do. So we have some student panels. So the virtual tour is a virtual tour, but we'll specifically have panels with students for different special interests, general student panels, where really the content is we might prompt with a couple questions, but they're student-led. You don't see the admissions people doing it. It's our students talking and answering questions with other students. We tried out some like real specialized platforms to try to make it look slick. Most of the time, Zoom works. It's just letting students be able to engage with other students, with faculty. We have some canned content where we have faculty talk about their academic departments, and I think there's value in that. But at a certain point, they want to get to feel what it's like to talk with this faculty member. When you're choosing an institution like ours, that classroom experience is so important, and so is the outside of classroom experience. And so I think most colleges are now figuring out ways to get that level of engagement in ways where authentic conversations can happen. We also have a platform that's pretty popular right now. It's like the 50th most popular social media on the Apple App Store, which is called ZMe, and it has hundreds of colleges, and it's student to student. So it's college students at that campus, and so they're asking questions, and for many students it's more comfortable than like being on a Zoom screen and being the person to ask the first question. So there are different opportunities, and I'm sure there are things WPI isn't doing that UConn is doing or other schools are doing. So it's literally asking that question of the schools that you're talking with is like, how can my student engage with other students, engage with faculty and community members?
Yeah, I mean, Andy's 100% right. I mean, I totally agree with that. There is, from an informational standpoint, there is not going to be any difference in what you can learn about a institution. You still have the same opportunities to be able to talk one-on-one with a student, to be able to hear from a faculty member, to learn about the College of Engineering or whatever the program. So from an information gathering standpoint, that still lives, that still is available, and in some ways it's even better than it was before. But I'm gonna also say that there is that piece that we are hoping to get back slowly and surely. That is the allowing the experience of the student coming on campus, because there is still nothing that replaces that feeling. I can speak from personal experience. When I did a recruiting visit and at the institution I ultimately chose, it was that I had a feeling that when I was on that campus that it was just very comfortable for me. And so again, that no matter all the great information we have virtually, we're not going to be able to offer that. But I feel confident from at least getting the information that, when you're making the list and, deciding, the pros and cons of a university, that you're still going to be able to get that from the virtual or looking at the institutions on their websites.
I felt like there was a question coming from over here.
Hi, I'm actually a parent of a senior, so we're in the midst of this process right now. I have a question about GPAs in terms of, like, our school does not calculate official or any GPA in a transcript. So what do you do with those transcripts?
Okay, start. Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. I'll answer your question by talking about how we do evaluations in our office. And so, we evaluate applications by territory. And what I mean by that is that we have readers who are assigned a certain geographic area, and they look at the schools in a certain area. And so why I use that as my response is that our readers understand the academic evaluation that the schools in their territory have. And so, a student from Pomfret is not going to be evaluated compared to a student from school B that may have a numeric grading scale or a letter grading scale, because we want to evaluate our applicants in the context of the school that they go to. And I think a number of universities do it that way. And so someone who goes to Pomfret, our readers understand the rigor that is offered at the school. Our students understand the college-going rates of the students who are getting a Pomfret education and how successful they are at UConn and other institutions. And so, for us, we're going to be evaluating the applicants in the context of the school that they go to. And so someone should not feel that they're going to be at a disadvantage compared to someone who is going to a school that has that more traditional scale, because again, we understand the offerings at Pomfret, we understand the evaluation method at Pomfret, and that's how we're going to be doing the evaluation of the academic achievement of a student in our admissions process.
Yeah, so very much the same to Vern, and you've got two schools up here who know Pomfret, who love Pomfret students, who have had very successful Pomfret students come to our institutions, and so that's a benefit. But you might be applying somewhere else where they haven't seen an application from Pomfret in a decade. So every school puts together what's called a high school profile, and it gives that information, that context that's so important. So rest assured, it's not just relying on that, but you have the benefit of the territory management that Vern is describing. And at WPI, we don't calculate an official GPA either. And actually, our students, part of our grading philosophy is that we want students collaborating, not competing. So students can only get an A, a B, or a C, or an NR, which stands for no record. Students don't fail at our school. We're an engineering STEM type of institution. They go back. They haven't achieved it yet. And so we don't have pluses or minuses. We don't calculate GPAs. And so in our admissions process, that's not the most important thing. We do have an academic scoring that we do where we consider the school's context. We consider the appropriate rigor that a student has taken and assign that a numeric value based on a rubric that we have. And we consider their academic performance, and we give that a score on a certain rubric scale. And so it's not about the number of AP courses a student's taken or the weighted versus unweighted. And I think that's one of the things that, at least for our school and Vern School, I don't think you have to worry about that, but it is a good question to ask. Absolutely. Because every school does do things differently. There are some schools, not many, but many schools, larger schools, that, as Vern said, throw them in a spreadsheet and above this line. There are some schools that do that. It's rare, and we don't really see it in the Northeast as much, but it's important to ask those questions of the schools you're considering.
Great. Before I close and we thank our guests, I just wanted to give a public compliment to all of you. We had Logan Powell here yesterday, who's the Dean of Admissions at Brown University, and he spoke to our kids in the chapel, and your children, our children, were the bomb. The kids were phenomenally behaved and then asked some of the most thoughtful, sophisticated questions. So that's part of the reason why I'm riding an emotional high right now. They were outstanding. Also outstanding were our guests here today. Can we give them a round of applause? And I'm extremely grateful for all of you being here during Family Weekend and listening to us and for the interest you're showing in the college application process. Vern, Andy, Sarah, Art, and I are going to move kind of off to the side if you have some more specific questions you want to ask us offline. Thank you all very much.